Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Doha, the US and Taliban have signed a historic peace deal, paving the way to end the 19-year war in Afghanistan. The agreement was signed between US Special Representative for Afghanistan Reconciliation Zalmay Khalilzad and Taliban leader Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar. This report has the details.
According to the joint declaration, the US and NATO troops will fully withdraw from Afghanistan within 14 months. This is subject to the Taliban fulfilling its commitments under the deal. As per the agreement, 5,000 Taliban members are to be released from Afghan-run jails, while the group will release up to 1,000 prisoners by 10th March. The deal envisions a guarantee to prevent the use of Afghan soil by any international terrorist groups against the US and its allies. Most importantly, the deal also calls for a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire. Addressing the historic event, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the Taliban must keep their promise to cut all ties with Al-Qaeda. He said the agreement will mean nothing if concrete actions are not taken on commitments and promises.
The agreement that we will sign today is the true test of this effort. We will closely watch the Taliban's compliance with their commitments and calibrate the pace of our withdrawal to their actions. This is how we will ensure that Afghanistan never again serves as a base for international terrorists.
Speaking at the event, Abdul Ghani Baradar said the Taliban is committed to the agreement with the US. He said he is hopeful important countries like Pakistan, China and Russia will take part in the future of rebuilding Afghanistan. He said the group is keen on building ties with the regional countries.
The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan with the United States has reached an agreement. We are committed to this agreement to enforce it. Also, as a political force, we want to maintain good relations with our neighbors, regional countries and international community. We want positive relationship with all.
Ahead of the ceremony in Doha, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani addressed a press conference in Kabul alongside US Defense Secretary Mark Esper. Ghani expressed hope that the Doha deal will lead to an enduring peace between his government and the Taliban.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the US-Taliban deal marks the start of a reconciliation process to end the decades-long conflict. In a tweet, Khan welcomed the deal and said Pakistan is committed to playing its role for lasting peace in Afghanistan. Speaking in Doha earlier, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said the pact will hopefully lead to an intra-Afghan dialogue. More in this report.
The US-Taliban deal has set the stage for the withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan after more than 18 years of war. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi welcomed the signing of the deal as a crucial move towards peace in the region. He said the agreement couldn't have been reached without Islamabad's support.
Well, it's an important day. It's an important agreement that is being signed today. Hopefully, it will lead to the next step, which is an intra-Afghan dialogue and reconciliation of Afghans themselves. Ultimately, they have to sit and decide what they want for the future. We've come so far, and I'm glad that Pakistan has contributed to this day. We have facilitated the process, and I'm happy to be here.
Pakistan's role was also appreciated by US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Speaking after the signing ceremony, Pompeo expressed hope that Pakistan would continue to play its part for lasting peace in Afghanistan.
To Afghanistan's neighbors, including Pakistan, we thank you for your efforts in helping reach these historic agreements and make clear our expectation that you will continue to do your part to promote a peaceful and prosperous Afghanistan so that the country and region can reap the benefits of lasting peace.
Earlier, the head of the Taliban delegation, Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, also thanked Islamabad for facilitating the peace process.
We thank the Pakistanis for their efforts, for their work and assistance. I would like to thank them for that.
In a statement, Pakistan's foreign ministry said the deal validates Pakistan's stance that there is no military solution to the Afghan conflict.
The US and the Afghan Taliban have finally signed a historic peace deal after months of on-off talks. But why was the US fighting a war in Afghanistan in the first place, and why did it last so long? This report will tell you more.
On September 11, 2001, a terrorist attack on the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon in Washington killed nearly 3,000 people. The attacks dramatically changed the world's political landscape. The United States believed that the Afghanistan-based Osama bin Laden, the head of Al-Qaeda, was behind the outrages. The Taliban, who ran Afghanistan and protected bin Laden, refused to hand him over. A month later, in October, the then US President George W. Bush ordered airstrikes against Afghanistan. The US targeted bin Laden's Al-Qaeda and also the Taliban. As other countries joined the war, the Taliban were rapidly forced from power in December the same year. The Taliban were driven out of parts of southern Afghanistan, but this didn't last. As international forces began to withdraw from the fighting, the Taliban were able to regroup. For 18 years, the Taliban and US forces have exchanged attacks, killing thousands of fighters and innocent civilians. In 2012, the first initiative was taken for a peace deal between the two warring sides, but this broke down 2 months later. Since then, the US and its allies have struggled to strike a peace deal. Negotiations between both sides in Doha entered their highest level last week, building on momentum that began in late 2018. The peace talks centered on the withdrawal of all foreign troops from Afghanistan.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says India's RSS-inspired state-sponsored terrorism will have global consequences. The Prime Minister issued the statement as 42 people, mostly Muslims, have been killed in sectarian clashes in New Delhi. The Prime Minister said the world needs to take action against this extremism in India. Khan said the Delhi carnage will eventually lead to the radicalization of Indian Muslims. The Prime Minister said the Hindutva ideology has pushed Kashmiri youth towards radicalization. In India, New Delhi's week-long riots during anti-citizenship law protests have drastically compromised citizens' safety. As the deadly violence erupted, a small hospital in a densely packed Muslim neighborhood found itself at the epicenter of the unrest. More in this report.
42 people were killed as Hindu radicals targeted 4 mosques, 79 houses, and 52 shops owned by Muslims. Al-Hind Hospital was flooded with patients, and it has also become a place of refuge for people whose homes were burnt or destroyed.
I was beaten, and they vandalized my house and set everything on fire. I was beaten in this situation. We came here on Tuesday. They torched 3 houses and left nothing.
Doctors described being overwhelmed when dozens of wounded streamed into the 15-bed, 2-story building. Some were carried on people's shoulders, others on wooden carts, stretching the hospital's resources to the limits.
The mob particularly targeted vital organs. It felt as the attackers knew human anatomy as if they were from a medical profession. The 2 injured and other injuries that we saw were in the same condition, as all the stabs are in the vital organs.
69 people have been killed in various incidents since India passed the Citizenship Amendment Act on 11th December.
Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has warned the Syrian government will pay the price for the deaths of the Turkish troops in Idlib. Speaking in Istanbul, Erdogan said he has told Russia's President Vladimir Putin to stand aside and let Ankara deal with the Syrian forces alone. He said Turkey does not intend to leave Syria right now. Erdogan also said Ankara will keep the doors open for refugees heading to Europe. Tensions between Turkey and Russia rose after 33 Turkish soldiers died in an airstrike in Syria on Friday. But the Russian Foreign Ministry said the 2 sides have agreed to reduce tensions in Idlib after days of talks in Ankara. Arab League has called for an immediate ceasefire between all the warring parties in northwestern Syria. In a statement, Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghaid warned against the seriousness of escalated military confrontations in Syria. He said the military escalation in northwestern Syria has formed a model of blatant violation of humanitarian and international law. Ghaith said the fighting has caused an unprecedented humanitarian disaster by displacing over 1 million Syrians. He also called for the negotiations sponsored by the UN to activate the political course. The Secretary General said implementing the political process according to the UN Security Council Resolution 2254 was crucial. Tensions between Ankara and Damascus are rising in Idlib after Turkey lost 33 soldiers in an attack carried out by the regime. Earlier, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for a ceasefire in Syria before the situation spirals out of control. Speaking at the Security Council meeting, Guterres said the killing of Turkish troops in Syria is one of the most alarming moments in the 9-year war. More in this report.
Tensions in Syria have been high since Turkish and Syrian government forces began attacking each other in Idlib province. The 15-member UN Security Council met after Russian-backed Syrian troops killed 33 Turkish soldiers. At the meeting, Turkey and Russia exchanged heated arguments. The Turkish ambassador said it's time for a political solution to the Syrian conflict, or civilians will continue to suffer.
Mr. President, yesterday's events are a stark reminder that the regime is hell-bent on continuing its attacks to intimidate Syrian civilians, as well as destroy Syrian opposition and the prospects for a political solution.
The Russian envoy, Vasily Nebenzia, argued the Syrian army has the right to respond to any ceasefire violations within the Idlib zone. But, he said, Moscow is ready to reduce conflict in the area to avoid such tragedies in the future.
We regret the fact that the Turkish soldiers died, just as we regret the reports about the death of Syrian soldiers who were convinced that respecting the agreements, including on the conflicting, will avoid such tragedies in the future. Our forces on the ground are prepared to work towards that.
The US President, Donald Trump, also condemned the attack on Turkish soldiers. In a statement, Trump called on Russia and Syria to stop the Idlib operation.
Hundreds of refugees have stormed the border crossing in Turkey in an attempt to get to Europe. The move comes as a response to the escalating war in northwestern Syria. One refugee said his family has slept outdoors in freezing temperatures with the hope of finding a better life in Europe. Migrants hoping to cross to Europe from Turkey are trying sea vessels and land vehicles in order to make the trip. Since 2016, Europe has consistently relied on Turkey to halt the flow of the Syrian refugees. Security forces in Greece fired guns and used sound bombs to prevent the refugees from entering the country. The UN envoy for Libya, Ghassan Salameh, says the 3 days of political talks in Geneva ended without any result. Meanwhile, witnesses in Tripoli say bombardment in the last 24 hours was the heaviest since the 12th of January when the ceasefire was agreed on. The dialogue was underway as part of the peace process to get a ceasefire in the conflict-ridden country. Salameh said talks only led to an agenda and terms of reference for the next round with no concrete steps towards a ceasefire. In a statement, he said that there have been serious violations of the conflict agreement in the country in the past 24 hours. He says 6 of the 13 representatives of the High State Council have left for Libya. Salameh said he will invite the parties to Geneva for a second round next month. Malaysia's King Abdullah has appointed former Interior Minister Muhyiddin Yassin as the country's new Prime Minister. Earlier, Interim Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad claimed to have secured the majority to become the new Premier with the support of his on-off ally Anwar Ibrahim. In a statement, the King's Palace said Muhyiddin will be sworn in tomorrow. The process to appoint the Prime Minister cannot be delayed. The Prime Minister appointee Yassin has asked for all the Malaysians to accept decision by the National Palace. Earlier, Mohammed Said agreed to be the prime ministerial candidate after talks with the coalition parties. Uncertainty has loomed over Malaysian politics since Mahathir Mohamad resigned from the office last Friday. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In China, another 47 people have died from the coronavirus in the last 24 hours, which puts the number of the dead at over 2,800. The National Health Commission has recorded 427 new cases, raising the number of infections to over 79,000. More in this report.
While there has been a slowdown in the number of virus casualties in China, the outbreak is intensifying in some other countries. South Korea says it has recorded 594 more cases today, making this the country's largest infection increase to date. Japan has closed schools, Switzerland has banned rallies, while flights are being cancelled worldwide. Iran's health ministry says 34 people have died in the country. It says it rejects reports of the BBC of 210 deaths. The World Health Organization says the risk of new coronavirus at a global level is now very high.
We are on the highest level of alert, or the highest level of risk assessment in terms of spread and in terms of impact. But that is not in order to alarm or scare people. And I think this is a reality check for every government on the planet. Wake up, get ready. This virus may be on its way and you need to be ready.
The UN says it is concerned by the spread of the disease. Secretary General is urging the international community to step up efforts and combat the illness together.
The greatest enemy right now is not the virus, it is fear, rumors and stigma. Now it's the time for all governments to step up and do everything possible to contain the disease, and to do so without stigmatization and respecting human rights. We know containment is possible, but the window of opportunity is narrowing.
Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has banned entry of citizens from the member states of Gulf Cooperation Council in the holy cities of Mecca and Medina over virus fears.
Pakistan has confirmed 2 more cases of coronavirus in the country. This brings the total number of the cases in Pakistan to 4. Health officials say one of the patients is from Karachi, while the second case was confirmed in the federal areas. Special Assistant to Prime Minister on Health, Zafar Mirza, said the first 2 patients are on their way to recovery. Mirza added the precautions and responsibility are needed to combat the coronavirus instead of fear. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un warns of serious consequences if infectious new coronavirus spreads in the country. The leader oversaw military drills, making a rare public outing amid efforts to prevent the outbreak of the coronavirus in North Korea. Kim said no special cases must be allowed within the state's anti-epidemic system. He ordered to seal off all the channels through which the disease may find its way and strengthen checkup, test and quarantine. State media said the military drill was to judge the mobility and the firepower strikeability of Pyongyang. Slovakia is voting in its first parliamentary election since an investigative journalist and his fiancée were murdered in 2018. The couple's shooting shocked the nation and toppled Prime Minister Robert Fico, but his Social Democratic Party remains in the office. All 150 seats in the national parliament are up for grabs. Today's elections are seen as a battle between populists of far-right radicals and a new crop of liberal politicians. Opinion polls show the long-ruling populist Social Democracy Party is leading with almost 17%. It shows the centrist Ordinary People and Independent Personalities Party has the support of 15.5%. Slovaks have pledged to throw out the ruling party amid outrage over the murder of the journalist who was investigating high-level corruption. Protesters and security forces have clashed as anti-government protests flared up in today's capital of Santiago. Protesters exerting more pressure on the government after months of unrest over inequality and pensions and elitism. Riot police used water cannon to disperse protesters who threw missiles at police and gathered around a burning barricade in a show of defiance. Chile's President Sebastián Piñera replaced the country's education minister in a bid to appease the students-led movement. Former Education Undersecretary Raul Figueroa has replaced the outgoing Marcelo Ceballos, who has faced staunch criticism from protesters.
absolutamente convencido.
To the new Education Minister, Raul Figueroa, if there is an area where we play a part in the future of our country, if we want to have a country with freedoms and opportunities and without restrictions and frustrations, it is in the area of education.
Raúl Figueroa. Si hay
Figueroa will be Chile's third education minister in the 2 years of Piñera's current administration. Now moving on, the UN says a commercial ship has rescued 35 Europe-bound migrants off Libya's Mediterranean coast and returned them to the capital Tripoli. In a tweet, the International Organization for Migration said the migrants were given medical assistance and relief items when they disembarked. The UN body for migrants says saving lives at sea is a moral and legal obligation, but returning migrants to unsafe ports is unacceptable. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees said the Libyan Coast Guard has rescued 1,944 people off the Libyan coast so far this year. Libya has emerged as a major transit point for the Africans and Arabs fleeing war and poverty in their home countries. Afghanistan has been at war for decades, leaving millions of its citizens destitute and miserable. Millions of displaced Afghans are struggling for a better life in different parts of the world. In Portugal, a young boxer is struggling to make it big after struggling to reach his goal for 15 years. Let's look at the motivation of Farid Walizadeh in this report.
Afghanistan hasn't had peace in 40 years. Today, thousands of its citizens are dead, injured or paralyzed. Some of them were lucky enough to escape the war-torn country, including Walizadeh, who fled Afghanistan at the age of 7. Now, the 22-year-old Afghan refugee is struggling to excel in the boxing arena in Portugal.
Afghanistan is full of war and problems. You cannot study, you cannot do sport, and in my situation, I didn't have a choice to leave because I didn't have family and house. Everything was destroyed. So I left Afghanistan.
After escaping his native country, Walizadeh traveled miles to reach Turkey. Housed in an orphanage in Istanbul, the 9-year-old began practicing Kung Fu and Taekwondo. After 5 years, the UN Refugee Agency relocated him to Portugal. Walizadeh started practicing boxing in Portugal, and after 5 months of hard work, he rose to become the national cadet boxing champion. Last year, he bagged a scholarship from the International Olympic Committee for the 2020 Games. Walizadeh is all set to face his first international qualification challenge next month, ahead of the Tokyo Olympics.
It's one of the reasons that boxing, I think, take my stress and trauma, because in boxing I can totally get focused in what I'm doing, so I forget what's happening in the past, and that's helped me in trauma. Now I'm training.
Walizadeh's coach Paulo Sico is blunt about the challenge he faces.
It's a complicated job. I need to make him bleed, literally bleed. We have to show people in 10 months what others do in 4 or 5 years. He's leaving his blood here for it.
The young Afghan national will compete in a qualifying tournament for European athletes in London next month. He is all set to represent the refugee Olympic team, to be followed by a world tournament in Paris this May.
I work hard. I don't know that if I deserve or not, but I work hard, and I want to inspire people that there's always second chance if they want. And I want to inspire people. I want to motivate people that to not say that, okay.
Walizadeh says he wants to leave his mark on history as a representative of refugees everywhere.
It's time for a short break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Lows on the highs of the business world now. Car-making giant Volkswagen has agreed on a settlement with the German Consumer Federation, the VZBV, over the 2015 emissions scandal. A court in Braunschweig announced that 260,000 German customers will receive compensation depending on the model and the age of the car. The settlement is significantly less than $15 billion payout a U.S. judge ordered the company to pay American consumers. The German consumers can choose to either accept the settlement or continue fighting for more money in individual lawsuits. The 2015 Dieselgate is one of the biggest car scandals in history, affecting the automotive industry on a global scale. Volkswagen had installed software in their 11 million vehicles, allowing them to cheat emissions tests. Time to take a look at the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now with the latest updates. You can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Thanks for watching.